Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to HOA and Karin Stories and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Because this story begins the way so many nightmares do, quietly, legally, and with a woman who smiles while crossing a line she has absolutely no right to cross. A locked gate. Clear warning signs. A peaceful piece of land far from any neighborhood drama. And then, out of nowhere, a black SUV rolls in like it owns the place. No introduction, no permission. Just entitlement on four wheels. By the end of this story, badges will be questioned, lies will unravel, and one so-called HOA president will learn the hard way that private property is not a suggestion. Mike Carter valued silence more than most people valued money. He didn't move out to the countryside because it was trendy or picturesque. He moved there because he was done with neighbors who thought opinions counted as authority, done with meetings, complaints, and people who believed rules only applied when it benefited them. When Mike bought the land, he made sure of three things: the deed was clean, the boundaries were surveyed, and there was no homeowners association within miles, no board, no bylaws, no nonsense. That morning started like every other morning he loved. The sun was just climbing over the trees, spreading soft gold across the pasture. Mike stood on his porch with a mug of coffee warming his hands while the world slowly woke up. His horses shifted in the field, already expecting breakfast. The air smelled like grass and damp earth, the kind of smell you can't fake or recreate anywhere else. This land was his peace. He walked down toward the barn, boots crunching lightly against the gravel, already planning the rest of his day. Fix a loose fence post near the south line. Pick up feed in town later, maybe ride before noon. Nothing urgent, nothing loud. Exactly how he liked it. That peace cracked the moment he heard tires. Not the friendly sound of a neighbor passing by on the road, not a delivery slowing down to turn around. These tires came in slow and deliberate, grinding gravel like the driver had no intention of stopping. Mike froze mid-step. His horses lifted their heads all at once. Animals always know when something isn't right. He turned toward the driveway just as a glossy black SUV rolled into view. Tinted windows. No front plate. The kind of vehicle that wanted to look official without actually being official. It stopped directly in front of his gate. The gate was impossible to miss. Heavy metal. Locked latch. Two large red signs bolted on both sides that read in plain English, PRIVE property. No trespassing. Mike waited. For a moment he thought maybe whoever it was would read the signs, realize they were in the wrong place, and back out. That's what reasonable people do. The driver door opened. A large man stepped out, shoulders squared, posture stiff, moving with the confidence of someone who was used to not being questioned. He didn't even glance at the signs. He walked straight to the gate, grabbed the latch, and swung it open like it belonged to him. Metal groaned. The SUV rolled through. That was the moment Mike knew this wasn't a mistake. Two more men stepped out next. Same build. Same matching navy shirts with embroidered patches that looked official if you didn't look too closely. Not law enforcement. Not county workers. Something else entirely. Something pretending. Then she stepped out. Karen Blake. Mike didn't know her name yet, but he would soon learn it very well. She was in her mid-40s, hair cut into a sharp blonde bob that didn't move even in the breeze. Sunglasses on despite the early hour. Boots that had never seen real dirt. She carried a tablet pressed against her chest like a badge of authority. She scanned the property slowly, lips curling into a satisfied smile, as if she were already deciding what needed to change. Mike walked toward them, calm but firm, stopping several feet away. "You're on private property," he said. "Gate was closed for a reason." Karen finally turned toward him, her smile polite and tight, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Oh, don't worry," she said lightly. "We're authorized to be here." Mike looked past her at the open gate, then back at her. Authorized by who? She lifted the tablet slightly. The Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Mike almost laughed. There is no HOA here, he said. This land isn't part of any development. Karen let out a small, rehearsed chuckle. That's a common misunderstanding. Our community expansion was approved last year. Your property falls within our extended management zone. Mike stared at her. No, it doesn't, she sighed, like he was being difficult on purpose. Sir, I'm the HOA president. We've already documented multiple violations on this property. Violations of what? Mike asked. She began scrolling. Unapproved fencing. Livestock without community registration. Non-compliant signage. And, she paused, looking up, that gate is not HOA approved. Mike felt something shift in his chest, not anger yet, but disbelief. You broke my lock, he said flatly. Karen waved a hand. Our security contractor handled that. Mike turned to the men behind her. You trespassed. You damaged private property. You have about 10 seconds to leave. Karen's smile hardened. That won't be necessary, she said. If you don't comply, we're authorized to issue fines and begin enforcement procedures. Mike stepped closer. You're not authorized to do anything on my land. One of the men shifted his stance, hand resting near his belt, where nothing official was clipped. A threat without words. Karen leaned in slightly. You should really cooperate. It'll save you a lot of trouble. Mike pulled out his phone. Good, he said, because I'm calling the sheriff. Her eyes flickered for just a second. Not fear, annoyance. You can do that, she said, but by the time they arrive, we'll have documented everything. Mike didn't respond. He just spoke into the phone, calm and clear, reporting trespassers, property damage, and impersonation. Karen straightened her jacket. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Mike met her stare. No. You are. The wind moved through the pasture, the horses shifting uneasily as the tension thickened. The men exchanged glances. Karen tapped her tablet again, pretending control she didn't actually have. None of them noticed the small detail that was about to unravel everything. The survey marker at the edge of the drive. Bright orange. Official. Undeniable. And the sheriff was already on his way. The minutes stretched in a way that made the air feel heavier than it already was. Mike stood still near the open gate, phone lowered now, his call already placed, his message already clear. Trespassers, property damage, possible impersonation. Out here, the sheriff didn't take those words lightly. Out here, lines mattered. Karen Blake pretended not to notice the shift. She tapped at her tablet with exaggerated calm, lips pressed into a thin smile, as if paperwork alone could bend reality. One of the men behind her paced slowly along the driveway, boots crunching gravel like he was testing how far he could go before someone stopped him. The other two stood near the SUV, arms crossed, eyes scanning the land, as if they were inventorying something that didn't belong to them. Mike watched everything. He noticed how Karen avoided looking at the boundary marker now. He noticed how her voice, when she finally spoke again, had lost just a little of its confidence. You really should think about this, she said, not looking up. HOA enforcement can get expensive. Mike didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You're not enforcing anything, he said. You're trespassing. Karen sighed dramatically and looked up at him again, that smile returning, tighter this time. Sir, refusing to cooperate never ends well. We've dealt with people like you before. Mike tilted his head. People with deeds? Her jaw twitched. One of the men stepped closer to Mike, just enough to test the space. Why don't you calm down, he said. Let her do her job. Mike turned slowly and met his eyes. Back up. The man hesitated. Karen cleared her throat sharply. Gentlemen, let's keep this professional. Professional. Mike almost laughed again. The sound of a vehicle approaching down the road cut through the standoff. Gravel shifted differently this time. Faster. Purposeful. Karen stiffened before she even turned around. A county sheriff's cruiser rolled into view, light bar flashing but no siren. Calm, controlled, confident. It pulled up just outside the open gate and stopped. The deputy stepped down. Tall, older, weathered face. The kind of man who'd seen every version of a bad idea play out in real time. His eyes moved from the broken latch to the SUV, to the men in matching shirts, and finally to Karen, who was already pasting on her most official smile. "Morning," the sheriff said evenly. "Who wants to tell me why there's an open gate on posted land?" Karen stepped forward immediately. "Deputy, thank goodness you're here. We're with the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. This man has been non-compliant and hostile." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" She held up her tablet. "We're conducting enforcement under HOA authority." The sheriff didn't look at the tablet. He looked at the gate, then the signs. Then Mike. "Is this your property?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Mike replied. "I have the deed." "Surveyed boundaries. No HOA." Karen cut in quickly. "That's not accurate. Our HOA expanded." "Ma'am," the sheriff said calmly, holding up a hand. "I'll get to you." Karen froze, smile faltering for a fraction of a second. The sheriff turned fully to Mike. "You call this in?" "Yes, sir. They broke the lock and entered without permission." The sheriff nodded slowly, then looked back at Karen. "Do you have written authorization showing this land falls under your HOA?" Karen's fingers tightened around her tablet. "It's all in our records." "County records," the sheriff said. "Not yours." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "HOAs don't override deeds," he said. "If you claim jurisdiction, you'd better have county documentation." Karen swallowed. "We were advised." "By who?" She hesitated. The men behind her shifted uneasily now. One glanced at the open gate again, like he was considering how quickly they could leave if things went sideways. Mike watched Karen's composure crack in small, quiet ways. The smile came slower now. The confidence thinned. The sheriff walked over to the boundary marker and crouched slightly, brushing dirt away with his boot. Bright orange, fresh. "Official. You see this?" he said, gesturing. Karen didn't move. "This marker was placed after a recent survey," he continued. "That survey puts this land outside any HOA boundary by a good margin." Karen forced a laugh. "Surveys can be wrong." The sheriff stood up and looked directly at her. "Not this one." Silence settled in, thick and uncomfortable. Mike finally spoke again. "I want them off my land." The sheriff nodded. "That's reasonable." Karen's voice sharpened. "You can't just—" "Yes, I can," the sheriff interrupted. "You entered posted private property without permission and caused damage." "That's trespassing." Her face flushed. "We were acting under HOA authority." "You don't have any," he said flatly. One of the men stepped forward. "Deputy, we were just following instructions." The sheriff turned to him slowly. "Then your instructions were bad." Karen straightened her shoulders, desperation creeping into her tone. "This is harassment. We'll file a complaint." The sheriff didn't flinch. "You're welcome to. But right now, you're leaving." She opened her mouth to argue again, then closed it. Mike watched the moment she realized she had lost control. Karen snapped her finger sharply. "Get the vehicle." One of the men moved quickly, too quickly, toward the SUV. The sheriff's hand rested casually near his radio. "Easy," he said. "Nobody's running." The man froze, then nodded and slowed down. As they gathered themselves, Karen turned back to Mike, her voice low and venomous. "This isn't over." Mike met her stare without blinking. "It is for today." She didn't reply. The men climbed into the SUV. The engine started. Gravel sprayed as they backed out, careful now, painfully aware of eyes on them. Karen was the last to get in. Before the door closed, she looked back one more time, her expression no longer smug, no longer confident, just angry. The SUV rolled back through the gate and disappeared down the road. The sheriff watched until it was gone. He turned to Mike. "I'd recommend replacing that lock." Mike nodded. "Already planned to." The sheriff glanced at the broken latch again. "You hear from them again? Call me directly." Mike exhaled, tension finally draining from his shoulders. "Thank you." The sheriff tipped his hat. Some folks forget boundaries exist. As the cruiser pulled away, the land grew quiet again. But Mike knew better now. That silence wasn't peace anymore. It was a warning. And Karen Blake was not the kind of person who accepted being told no. The quiet that returned after the sheriff left didn't feel the same as before. It should have. The gate stood open, the road empty, the morning light climbing higher the way it always did. The horses settled back into grazing, the breeze moving through the pasture like nothing had happened. But Mike felt it in his chest, that subtle shift that told him something had changed. Peace, once broken, never comes back exactly as it was. He fixed the gate first. Not later, not after breakfast. Right then. He replaced the broken latch with a heavier one, drilled the screws deeper, and added a chain thick enough that breaking it would take more than arrogance and bolt cutters. When he was done, he stepped back and looked at it, not with satisfaction, but with resolve. If Karen Blake thought this was over, she was wrong. The next few days passed quietly, but not normally. Mike noticed cars slowing near the driveway. Not stopping, just slowing. He noticed unfamiliar trucks parked down the road for a few minutes at a time. He noticed how the mail carrier lingered longer than usual, eyes darting toward the gate like she'd heard something she didn't fully believe. Rumors travel fast in small counties. By the end of the week, Mike got his first letter. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, slid into the mailbox like it was ashamed of itself. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed, not handwritten. No greeting, no signature. Notice of non-compliance. Mike read it twice. It listed violations that made no sense at all. Unauthorized agricultural use. Improper signage. Failure to submit to HOA inspection. The fines totaled thousands of dollars and increased daily. At the bottom, one line stood out. Failure to comply may result in lien proceedings. Mike laughed, a short, humorless sound. There was no HOA. There never had been. He drove straight to the county office. The clerk at the desk listened carefully as Mike laid the letter down. She adjusted her glasses, frowned, and pulled up records on her computer. Her expression shifted from confusion to irritation. "This property isn't under any association," she said. "It never has been." "That's what I told her," Mike replied. She shook her head. "We've had a few complaints about Willow Creek Estates lately." That caught Mike's attention. "Complaints how?" She lowered her voice. "Boundary intimidation. Fake fines. Threats of liens that never get filed." Mike felt his jaw tighten. "And nobody stopped them?" "We're working on it," she said. "But HOAs operate in a gray area until they cross a certain line." Mike folded the letter carefully. They crossed it. 2 days later, Karen crossed it again. This time, she didn't bring an SUV. She brought paperwork. Mike was in the barn when he heard voices near the gate. Not engines, people. Confident footsteps. He walked out slowly, already knowing who he'd see. Karen stood outside the gate, flanked by 2 different men this time, no matching shirts. Button-downs and khakis. One held a clipboard. The other held a camera. She smiled when she saw Mike, like they were old friends. "Good afternoon," she said. "We're here to conduct a visual inspection from the public roadway." "There is no public roadway past that gate," Mike replied. She gestured vaguely. "The easement." "There is no easement." Her smile didn't falter. "You really should consult an attorney." "I have one," Mike said. That finally made her blink. She recovered quickly. "Then you know, liens can be very inconvenient." Mike stepped closer to the gate. "Then you know filing a false lien is a felony." The man with the clipboard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, maybe we should." Karen shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. "We're fine," she turned back to Mike. Last chance to cooperate. Mike crossed his arms. Leave. She leaned closer to the gate, lowering her voice. You don't want this fight. Mike leaned in too, his voice calm, steady. You already lost it. Her smile vanished. She straightened abruptly, snapping her fingers. Take photos. The man with the camera raised it hesitantly, snapping a few shots of the gate, the signs, the horses. Documenting harassment, Mike said aloud, pulling out his phone and recording everything. Karen's eyes flicked to the phone. That's illegal. No, it isn't, Mike replied. You're on my property line threatening false legal action. The tension thickened again, but this time Karen didn't push forward. She stepped back, eyes narrowing. We'll see you in court. Mike didn't answer. That night, Mike's attorney called. She's filed a notice of intent, the lawyer said. It's baseless, but it's aggressive. What does that mean? It means she's counting on you backing down. Mike looked out the window at his land, dark and quiet under the stars. I won't. Neither did the county. Within days, an official letter arrived, this one with seals and signatures. An investigation had been opened into Willow Creek Estates, HOA. Multiple reports. Pattern of behavior, possible fraud. Karen Blake had drawn attention she couldn't control. The final straw came the following Saturday. Mike was riding along the south fence line when he heard shouting near the gate. He urged his horse forward, heart pounding. Karen was back, this time with a tow truck. She stood pointing at Mike's pickup parked near the barn, yelling into her phone. Yes, unauthorized vehicle. Yes, immediate removal. Mike dismounted fast. Call it off. She spun toward him, eyes blazing. You're obstructing HOA operations. Mike looked at the tow driver. You touch my truck, you're stealing it. The driver hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Ma'am, I need proof. Karen shoved paperwork at him. Here. Mike stepped between them. Those papers are fake. The driver froze. Sirens sounded in the distance. Karen turned pale. She backed up slowly, eyes darting, calculating. The sheriff's cruiser appeared over the hill. Karen's plan had gone too far. And this time, there would be consequences. The sound of the siren changed everything. It cut through the afternoon air, sharp and unmistakable, bouncing off the trees and rolling across the pasture like a warning meant for one person alone. Karen Blake froze mid-sentence, her phone still pressed to her ear, her confident posture collapsing into something rigid and uncertain. The tow truck driver stepped back instinctively, hands raised slightly, already sensing he had wandered into a situation he wanted no part of. Mike didn't move. He didn't need to. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up fast, dust kicking up as it stopped just short of the gate. The same deputy stepped out, expression already hardened, eyes locking onto Karen like he had expected to see her again. What's going on here? He asked. Karen rushed forward, words tumbling out too quickly, too rehearsed. Deputy, thank goodness. He's obstructing HOA enforcement. We authorized a vehicle removal due to ongoing violations. The sheriff didn't even look at Mike yet. He looked at the tow truck. Then the paperwork in Karen's shaking hand. You again, he said calmly. Karen stiffened. This man is non-compliant and aggressive. The sheriff finally turned to Mike. Your truck? Yes, sir. And you authorized a tow? No, sir. The sheriff took the papers from Karen and skimmed them slowly. His jaw tightened. These aren't county documents, he said, and this property is not under any HOA jurisdiction. Karen's voice sharpened. That's your opinion? The sheriff looked up at her. No. That's the law. The tow truck driver exhaled loudly. I'm out, he said, already climbing back into his cab. Call someone else. Karen grabbed his arm. You can't just leave. He shook her off. Watch me. The truck rolled away, gravel spraying as it disappeared down the road. Karen stood there, exposed now, without backup, without props, without control. The sheriff stepped closer. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put your phone down. She didn't. I said now. Slowly, she lowered it. You've been warned before, he continued. You've been told this land is private. You've been told you have no authority here." She laughed nervously. "This is harassment." "No," he said. "This is fraud." Her face drained of color. The sheriff turned to his radio and spoke calmly, clearly. "I need a unit for documentation and an investigator for HOA misconduct." Karen took a step back. "This is ridiculous." The sheriff stepped forward. "So is filing false liens. So is attempting to seize private property. And so is impersonating authority." Mike watched as the weight of it all finally hit her. The tablet slipped from her hands and hit the gravel with a dull crack. She whispered, "I was just doing my job." The sheriff shook his head. "No, you were abusing power you never had." Within the hour, county investigators arrived. They photographed the gate, the signs, the boundary markers. They took Mike's statement. They took copies of the letters. They took Karen's tablet. Karen sat on the edge of the SUV, arms wrapped tightly around herself. No sunglasses now, no smile, no performance left. By sunset, she was escorted off the property with a formal notice and a warning she could not ignore. The investigation moved fast after that. Homeowners came forward. Letters surfaced. Fake fines. Threats. Intimidation tactics. Willow Creek Estates, HOA, wasn't expanding. It was bullying. Within weeks, Karen Blake was removed as HOA president. Charges were filed. Civil suits followed. The association was placed under oversight. And Mike, his land stayed quiet. The gate stayed closed. The horses grazed peacefully again. One evening, Mike stood on his porch, just like he had on that first morning, coffee in hand, the sun sinking low, painting the sky in warm gold and deep blue. The land breathed again. The silence returned, not fragile this time, but earned, because boundaries only matter when you defend them. And sometimes, the loudest lessons are taught by someone who refuses to back down. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to HOA and Karen's Stories, hit the like button, and share this video with anyone who's ever dealt with an HOA that thought it was above the law. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today?